Hello, welcome to the Online Strength Coach Podcast, episode 113. Unlucky for some, but hopefully not unlucky for you. Today's question comes via email from one of my clients. He's asking about programming. The question is as follows. I've programmed in loads of different ways. So two quick questions that I probably know the answers to already, but fuck it. Choosing rep ranges for percentage. I've always just referred back to Purplin's chart and then altered depending on the athlete. Also, what percentage to use for pause work. Also choosing a workout regime or a split. Why do you choose, say, upper and lower versus 3 full body days and 1 accessory day? I'm guessing the main comeback is it depends. Personally, I find most beginner and intermediate lifters benefit from upper-lower splits as they get some variation between days and time between big lower and upper lifts. Thanks for the question, Matthew. Hopefully the answer, you get what you need from it. So there's a lot to cover in these two questions, as innocuous as they may seem. You kind of hit the nail on the head there with your comeback as in it depends. When we talk about something such as programming or variables within programming, there are so many open variables and so many different permutations on any program or any athlete or any goal that we really need context before we can talk about specifics. There's no point talking about specifics without some form of context. So what we will discuss, or what I'll try to answer your question with, are principles that you can hopefully apply in your case, your clients or athletes that you're working with currently, to hopefully try to give you a better tool set to work with or a better mindset to work with when it comes to these problems. So first of all, we'll address sets and reps. So sets and reps, it really depends on what the goal of the training week or training session is, the context of the block or the context of the macro cycle, the year plan, the 4-year plan in the case of any Olympic athlete, the phase of training you're in, what we're trying to achieve with this session, with this week, with this block. So some different scenarios we may have. You may have a person who's doing an overload block, so some form of volume accumulation, say. Easy examples of volume accumulation, Smolov or Russian squat routine, where we're basically trying to start off with what is a high workload and then over time increase that workload for a finite period. So in the case of the Smolov base cycle, 3 weeks, and in the case of the Russian squat routine, also 3 weeks. Over that time, we are putting the lifter under a stress load that they cannot sustain, and it is intentional that they cannot sustain that stress load because we're trying to dip them into overreach so that we can pull them out the other end, super compensation, get a large peak in strength, or get like a short, sharp response in strength that we can utilize in the context of competition, or in most cases to get some stupid 1RM that you'll never get back to for about 2 or 3 years because you'll either get injured or you keep trying to chase the dragon and do stupid programs over and over again and not get quite back to where you got at the end of the full 12-week small switching cycle, which is very common problem that people have. So what we say is, so typically just think about it in balance. So like Purplin's chart's a pretty good way of thinking about that. However, Purplin's chart is based off Olympic lifting. So therefore, it is less applicable to most strength athletes or people who are using squat, bench, and deadlift in their programs. Squat, bench, and deadlift respond better actually to moderate workloads. So if you look at Purplin's chart, you'll see that for 90% and above, the optimal per session is 2 to 4 reps, which is not that far off base for the power lifts. However, you also see you have a maximum of 10 reps. You won't find a lot of lifters that can actually do 10 reps at 90% RM without like a decent preparation phase into it. So, and the idea with Purplin's chart is it's basically you can drag and drop it. You can't really do as a powerlifter or as a weightlifter, as a powerlifter or as someone who's using squat, bench, and deadlift. There's not really much chance you could use, say, 6 reps at 90%, even in one workout a week for 3 weeks in a row without burning out. It's probably not going to happen. So typically, when I look at, I tend to categorize my exercises. So when I look at like a power exercise, say, I'll categorize that As a power exercise, so that's push press, power clean, snatch, any form of weighted ballistic exercise where there's some form of loading phase, some kind of triple extension and ballistic or throw of the barbell. So in a sports program, this is where this typically we could use. Weightlifting is kind of a separate thing, um, and maybe a little bit too nuanced to go into too much detail regarding like general programming questions. But you would treat that differently as a weightlifter. As a general trainer or as a sports athlete or someone who's training general population, typically what I would say for power exercises is you want a frequency of like 2 to 3. Generally, you want 3 week cycle, a high work cycle. So typically something around 20 to 25 reps, percentages ranging from about 60 to 80%. Week 2, you want a moderate volume. You also want a moderate intensity. So we're probably talking somewhere in the region of 15 to 25 lifts with an average intensity from about 70 to 85%. And then on week 3, we want a high intensity with a lower volume. So we're talking 10 to 15 reps with an intensity range roughly 75 to 90%, or slightly up depending if the athlete's feeling good. And that's basically some rules you can use in a cyclical manner for that lift. If you want to do some kind of deload phase, or you maybe want to do something where you challenge work capacity, in that scenario you might want to do 30 to 40 lifts at an intensity range of about 50 to about 75 or 80%, and keep your reps higher. So for instance, in a power phase, to kind of eke this out in an example that maybe makes sense. So if we say we have a 4 week cycle, we want to hit our highest week on week 3. Maybe we want to have some kind of transition or deload phase in week 4. Week 1, you might do 2 sets of 6 at 70%, 2 sets of 5 at 75%, 2 sets of 4 at 80%. Week 2, we might look to do 2 sets of 4 at 75%, 2 sets of 3 at 80%, 2 sets of 2 at 85%. Week 3, you might look to do 2 sets of 3 at 80%, 2 sets of 2 at 85%, 2 singles at 90%, and leave an open-ended option if the athlete's feeling good to maybe work up to a new personal best. And then on week 4, as a deload, you might want to do 4 sets of 6 at 60%, say. And this can be done for a power clean, a push press, a hang snatch, any form of weighted ballistic triple extension activity that we can use as a transfer activity in the sport, or for any kind of general pop, we maybe want to do something a bit more explosive or a bit more fun. And this is something that we can use cyclically. So typically, when I think of putting together any form of 4 week block or any kind of loading pattern, I'll always want it to be used cyclically. So we could run it over and over and over and over again and get the same result or a better result out of it. We may stagnate, but that's why we have different periods of emphasis. We have periods of work capacity focus, periods of like a cyclical volume focus, and periods of like an intensity focus. If you follow your strongest year program, you'll see how that bears out over the year, and if you read the blog post, you'll also start to understand how that's put together and why that is the way it is. So that's a ballistic triple extension activity. If we look at something more basic, so we look at a squat. So this could be put in the context of a powerlifter, can be put in the context of Gen Pop, or it can be put in the context of a powerlifter, of an athlete. So we look at something like a back squat side. So again, the way I categorize this is I have what I will term volume work, or where we'll work on volume and technique. So techniques for volume work or work capacity. Typically this lies from 50 to 80%. Typically frequency for this work will be 2 to 3 times per week. And we'll normally, so I don't really tend to follow set like 6x6, 5x5, 4x4. I'm more of a fan of spreading the workload across. So if I can maybe do 2 sets of 6, 2 sets of 5, 2 sets of 4, 2 sets of 8, 2 sets of 6, 2 sets of 4, something like that, where we can spread the intensities and the volume of the sets around. Because the more variance we get that way, the less likely when it comes to a point where we actually stagnate or stall. This is probably more pertinent to the weak organization, but if we get to a point where we stagnate or stall, if we have a more varied loading cycle, or we vary our loading cycle more, the more we vary it, the quicker we can get back to fitness, because we're not doing something like Smolov where there's a 12-week cycle, and if we fuck up on week 5 of 12, we have to start again. We probably have to start again once we come back to fitness, because we're not doing any kind of overreach peaking routine. We're just doing like a cyclical training routine. Our fitness is coming up slowly and gradually as we load different parameters from week to week, session to session. So what we're talking about here for 3 categories. So we have technique, moderate volume, so that's higher volumes, frequencies of 2 to 3, intensities of 50 to 80%. We then have what I might term as a transition volume. Transition volume are what I've also termed as meaningful volume in other articles, other podcasts. Meaningful volume is basically, if you push this volume up, you will get stronger at your 1RM. So this is typically 75 to 90%. We're talking frequencies of about 1 to 2, and we're talking about moderate volumes, and you'll understand what I mean by moderate volumes when we talk through the ins and outs of it. And then your next category is peaking. So peaking is basically from 85 to 100%, frequency of 1, and typically this will be done maybe in a 4-week block, and maybe do this twice. So how might this look? So let's say, for example, we're doing a work capacity block for squat. So what we might look at is a frequency of 3, 1 exercise variation per session. We might look at, say, session 1, might do simple back squat, maybe look at doing 2 sets of 8 at 65%, 2 sets of 6 at 70%, 2 sets of 4 at 75%. So we're have an average percentage of 70%, and we have total lifts in the region of about 36 to 40 lifts. So we may do that on Monday and Friday. So we have 2 periods of high work that are specific to that are on direct transfer exercise, which is the back squat for squat. And then let's say the lifter has a specific problem. So let's say this lifter maybe buckles forward in a squat. So a good lift for that is a front squat, because it puts the balance in the front. And maybe we might look to do for that, maybe we look at 4 sets of 4 at like 50%. So over the entire week, we have in the region of 70 to 90 squats. We have an average intensity of about 60%, thereabouts. So we have a high volume, and we have like a moderate to low volume. So that's what you might term as like a technique specific, volume specific week, where we can work on that problem and iron it out. Now let's say we're looking at more of we're trying to build strength. So maybe we're flip-flopping, so maybe that's week 1. So we're working on restorative volume, problem solving, lift variations, trying to build up a bit of work capacity over a longer time frame, and we're flip-flopping into the next week. So the next week, we'll stick with squat as the example. This can be applied to all lifts, obviously. It's more the context and how that applies to the sets and reps and the exercise variations. So let's say we move to a volume of 2. So sorry, we moved to a frequency of 2. That frequency of 2, we now have 2 lift variations per session. So on day 1, we do 5 sets of 4 at 80%, which gives us an INOL score of 1, which is like a good load, an optimal load. If you want to know what INOL is, it stands for intensity by number of lifts. It's basically a way of quantifying Perlin charts into like an integer or a number, and then they have scales of what that means for the workout. So 1's like an optimal amount of load for a workout, 2's overreach, 0.4 and under is like a non-stimulation workout. So if we do that 5 by 4, but we do it twice in the week, we get a weekly INOL score of 2, which basically means we have a good loading week. We will get stronger, we'll get a response from that week, but we're not going to overreach, we're not going to push the boat out, we're just going to have like a nice stimulation from that week. It's like, as far as like a neurological stimulus goes or a transfer stimulus goes into your 1RM, you will get an outcome from that week, you will get stronger from that week. Now let's put that in a different context. Now let's look at the assistance exercise alongside of that. So let's say in session one, we want to squat fresh. So we squat fresh, we do our thing, and then maybe we look at something like a rack squat or a pin squat, where we sit down to below parallel, let the bar settle on the rack, find our balance and stand. Again, this is a very good problem-solving lift for a lifter who collapses at the trunk. It allows them to feel where their balance should be and stand up. Gives them a different context to work with a skill, a different chance to put on a different pressure, and to come out with an outcome. And then session two, maybe we want to challenge the squat in a different way. Maybe we want to squat on fatigue. So what we do is we choose like another. So if we look at a context where we might, in session two, want to fatigue the lifter in a different way, we might use another variation that's good for making a lifter who crumples over aware of their point of balance or how they stand up, that being the band squat. It's very good as long as you walk it out so the line of pull of the band's in the center line of the foot, so basically where your center of balance should be throughout the entire lift, which is at the middle of the foot. If the line of pull of the band is directly in line with that, it's an excellent feedback tool for making someone aware of where their balance is during the lift. It's very good for teaching lifters who crumple out of the bottom to stand up chest first and actually keep their position in the lift. We maybe do, say, 6 sets of 3 of that at 50% band, or 50% bar weight with band tension equaling about 20 to 25% of 1 RM. So we do 6x3 of that, we do a bench variation so we get a bit of a rest, and then we go and do the exact same 5x4 workout at 80% of RM. So now the lifter's doing it, one, having had the sensory input of the band squat, or having that line of pull, having the feedback or the emphasis to drive out of the bottom, head first, chest first, with a good timing or a better timing anyway, to try and make sure the band's not push them forward, but also having fatigue. Now they have fatigue through the lower back, the legs, the glutes. So now they're in a different scenario with the 5x4 workout or the 5x4 squat workout. So it's the same session, but it's difficult, and it's more difficult in some ways, and it's easier in some ways. It's easier as in technically they may or they may not be more proficient after having done had the cueing of the band squat, but also more difficult as they are now have the fatigue or the local muscular fatigue of having done a back squat variation beforehand. So that's maybe in a context you could put it in like a loading week, or what I would term as a meaningful volume week. And then if we look at it in the context of a peaking block, so week one, maybe we have the first peaking block, so say we're 6 weeks out from a meet. Maybe week one we'll look to do a double, or maybe do a triple at 90%, maybe 2 triples at 90% of target load or of RM, basically what we're looking to do for our third attempt of the meet. So we've handled that weight, we know we can do it, we have that specific skill of handling a 90% load, but doing it for doubles or triples. Week two, we can maybe do a restorative block or like a meaningful volume block with like a lighter percentage. Week three, we then move up to 95%, so we can do this for singles or doubles. Again, 2 comp rules, but more we're looking to get that neurological input or that sensory input of handling these near limit weights, but trying to handle them in a manner where we're absolutely destroying them. Then maybe we have a down week, and then we go into competition, and that competition is basically where we're going to go to 100% or close to 100% and hit a peak, hit some form of max. So that's how you might utilize sets and reps, or how to choose sets and reps for different exercises or in different contexts. We could literally write a book on this topic. So that's kind of where some of the thought process comes behind where you choose certain sets and reps or certain schemes or percentages for different exercises. It depends wholly on where you are in your training phase, what the goal of the entire training phase is, what the goal of the session is, what the context of the exercise selection is. All of these factors go into why you choose certain sets, reps, certain percentages for different exercise variations or different sessions. So we'll look at the other topic, which is actually an easier topic to broach, the frequency. So typically, I'm similar. I found what works best for most lifters or for most people is a 4 day split, the upper lower split. That's typically what I've reverted back to most within my training. Over the aggregate of my training career, I've kind of went towards an upper lower training split with a day off in between and then a weekend off. Currently, I'm doing 4 total body sessions, all based around the power lifts, and that's pretty much how we'll program for the majority of my lifters. Most of my intermediate to advanced lifters will lift like that. Some of my beginner lifters are those who are focusing more on technique, might focus on a 3 day total power lift session. So like what you might term as a total power session, where you do squat variation, bench variation, deadlift variation every day. So we have a frequency of 3 on all lifts. This having a higher frequency allows us obviously to have more training sessions, more practice sessions, but also it allows a better skill learning, a better continual skill learning through the week, because you have 3 practices through the week, so it allows the lifter to actually get better in that context. And we can, what those exercises are, again, depends wholly on what the lifter is working on, or basically what the lifter's blockages are when it comes to skill learning or it comes to the lifts themselves. So it really depends. If you're training for hypertrophy, we want to hit the muscle minimum twice a week, maybe 3 times in the week. You want a lot for proper recovery. So if you're doing like what might be a high load or high stress session, typically you recommend 72 hours of total rest. So it's about 2 to 3 days of rest after that session. So maybe if you're doing like a really difficult squat session, you might want to give the lifter 2 to 3 days off of squat before they do that same lift again. You can get away with doing similar lifts, so you can get away with doing like a high load squat session and then maybe doing a lighter deadlift session the day afterwards. There is a bit of crosstalk between the 2 exercises, but they're not going to stress each other in exactly the same way. Deadlift typically has lower joint angles than squat, so the musculature affected tends to be different. And typically, because deadlift has lower joint angles through the lift, but still has a fairly large range of motion, it causes a fuckload of stress or a fuckload of damage to muscles and the low back specifically when it's done to intensity. So typically when you do a high intensity deadlift session, you're going to require a long time to get over that. Typically, to totally get over it, maybe 2 weeks. It can be, depending on. So you can find after like a full meet, you can be absolutely fucked for about 2 weeks afterwards if you peak really well for that meet. So within a bodybuilding context, 1 to 3 per week, depending. Some of the bodybuilding splits you'll see will do 1 a week. The research suggests that you should have a minimum of 2 a week, maybe 3 a week per body part. Basically, you want to provide enough stimulus or enough damage. There's a growth stimulus, but also you want the recovery built in so you can have more stimulus through the week. More total volume through the week should, in theory, equal more muscle growth. In terms of strength training, 2 to 3 times per week per lift is more than enough. You get some programs such as the Bulgarian method, inverted commas, where you do it every day. Some powerlifting programs such as the Danish style, where you can train 4 to 6 times per week for lifts. But if you, as a drug-free athlete, if you can do 7 days a week, 6 days a week training, but you have to put that into context, or you have to program your intensity and your volumes as such. You can't just go ham 7 days a week unless you want to get injured. You have to tailor your volume and tailor your intensity as such so you can recover from session to session. It's not something that you definitely can't do, but it's something that requires a lot of nuance and a lot of nice to put together and not hurt somebody. So it's maybe something I might stay away from if you're not a confident powerlifting coach. So yeah, it depends on goal and what you're trying to achieve when you're training. But typically for an athlete, I'd say 3 sessions a week is great. 2 to 3 sessions a week for an athlete. In a preseason for a rugby player or a football player or an athlete where you maybe concentrating more on strength and power, 4 times a week is really good. As a lifter for a beginner, 3 times a week is pretty standard. 3 times a week total bodies, very good way of doing it. Or 4 times a week upper lower split. For an intermediate trainer, 4 days a week total body or 4 days a week upper body upper lower split's pretty good. As an advanced trainer, it really depends on what you respond to. Me myself, I find the 4 days is pretty much my limit. I can go up to five if I do like assistance, or 5 to 6 if I do assistance on my rest days. But I just feel like I feel less zippy in my full lift sessions. So for me, I really just feel that I get the benefit out of doing the lifts I want to get better at. So, or variations thereof. So for bench press, like bench press, close grip bench press, pause bench press, feet up bench press, spotter press. These are the things that actually feed into my bench press. So I don't really pay too much attention to things like shoulder press, incline press, decline press. I don't really find there's any carryover to them. But I do have some upper back work, lat work in my program, so I find it does help, or certainly helps from a health point of view. But I just do that at the end of my normal full power sessions or my total body sessions. So it just depends, really. As you already said yourself, hopefully you've got something out of that. It has ran a fair bit longer than I thought, although to be fair, I probably could have ran on for another 25, 30 minutes. Any more questions you have regarding programming, exercise technique, anything, fire them my way because it's good content for me. Thanks very much for listening. I've been Mark, and I'll catch you. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below, or if you'd rather send me an email, please shoot it to speedpowerperformance@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. I've been Mark. I'll catch you in the next episode of the Online Strength Coach Podcast. Goodbye.